I graduated from Howard in 1965, and at Howard I had the best experience, and I think the best education that anyone could have. I mean, I had James A. Porter, James Wells, James L. Wells, Loïs Mailou Jones, Lila Asher, and David Driskell. Now, those people really instilled in us an appreciation and a duty to your craft, to honor your craft, and to be the best that you could. And they elevated us from just a mere craft to, oh, we're elevated. We are artists, and we must always, always respect that. We just found out we were mere kids after we graduated, you know. And as far as these people were not only teachers, they were people who were pursuing their own careers in the visual arts, and they were very, very good at it, very good at it. And what they did was with honor. The way they taught the kids, the students, was with honor. The way they treated their work was with honor. They didn't look upon it as wasteful, not wasteful. And that was a good time to be educated in art, a very good time. And I've taught in a lot of places. And I have never taught in a place where, in this country and in other countries, where there were more dedicated teachers. Loïs Mailou Jones, James A. Porter, and James L. Wells, those people were just, it's out of this world. They really were. They knew everything they needed to know about their craft and about their art. But Loïs Jones did take a group of us to Paris to go to school. We went to school there, and then she took us to the south of France. And that was my first experience in Paris. And it was nice. You know, we were young, 18 years old, you know. She made sure we saw everything. I mean, we went to the opera, we saw everything. Howard encouraged you to do your own style. They believed in you, too. They believed in you. That was good. Do you know? They truly did. And they did nurture you. They nurtured you. But I mean, they didn't coddle you like babies. They didn't do that, no. And they let you know whether or not you had the talent or not, too.
Well, as an undergraduate, that was the place to be. I mean, I saw that as it was my place, it was my calling. It was the place to be. Lois was my mentor. I learned a lot from her. I did my earlier work studying under her. James, well, we spent a lot of time in the studio. He would teach me a lot of his techniques. He was a printmaker. James A. Porter. I did my dissertation based on what he had taught me. He was my soulmate. He was part of me, and he was a gentleman. He was everything he wanted him to be. He was tremendously an artist, and he spoke that way. His work was that way. He was wonderful.
James Herring was head of the department, and James Porter taught drawing and painting, and Wells taught printmaking and some crafts, and Loïs Jones taught design. It was like a new world for me, really. I think Mr. Porter influenced me more than anybody else. I realized working with him that you can't be an artist. Some of the artists in Washington that taught school were like weekend artists, and they didn't have much, they didn't produce very much. And Porter didn't produce very much, but in the summer, he and Loïs Jones, and I didn't know about Mr. Wells.
Yes.
They would go somewhere and paint, and he encouraged us to be full-time artists. And that's what I am now.
One of my professors, Mr. James Wells, I took a course in drawings from Professor Wells. I was drawing, this was, as I recall, the spring of 1952, and I looked around, and over my shoulders there was a tall gentleman, very well dressed, looking down at my drawing, and he said, "What is your name?" And I said, "David Driskell." He said, "I don't know you. Are you an art major?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, what is your major?" And I said, "History." He said, "You don't belong over there, you belong here." That was James A. Porter. So I went and changed my major. He represented, if there was ever a role model for me of what I wanted to be, it was Professor Porter. He dressed well, he spoke well, he was so knowledgeable about his subject. And when I went into the classroom to pursue a course that he was teaching called Modern Negro Art, he used his own textbook. And I was impressed with the fact that there were these professors at Howard all using their own textbooks. They were brilliant. They were perhaps the brightest people in those subject areas in the world. They were landlocked, so to speak, at Howard. They couldn't go anyplace because Yale didn't want them, Harvard, Princeton. Those schools didn't want them. I could see in him everything that I wanted to be. He was an artist, he was articulate, he was a scholar, and he was a gentleman. I mean, he could entertain and hold forth in the best of company. I saw that as the person I wanted to be. He came into the classroom one day and I was painting, and I thought I was doing pretty good, and he complimented me. And he said, "You have talent in art and as a painter." He said, "But you have a good mind." And he said, "You have got to help carry on the tradition that I'm in." And he said, "You've got to help define the field." And at that time we were calling it Negro art. And he said, "You know, I won't be here forever." He said, "We'll have to pass the mantle on to somebody." And he said, "You have the capacity, you have the mind." So it was that kind of confidence, you know. I just knew I was his favorite student. Even though Loïs Jones would say in public, she said, "This is my pet student." So everybody was aiming to be closer to the teacher, you know. And Loïs would encourage us by, in a way, kind of treating us like we were already artists. She would take us downtown and we'd be painting in the streets, pretending we were in Paris, painting as she did, and so forth. So she was a little more indulgent. But Professor Porter was strict to the point, but accepting in the sense that you knew you had to achieve to be there. I think most importantly, I felt anointed. I felt that I was the chosen one. I would entertain my fellow colleagues by standing up, giving a lecture without notes, the way he did. I would try and dress like him. He was always immaculate, you know. He dressed almost like he had English suits and always the right little objects to go along with everything. So when I returned to Howard, Professor Porter said to me, he said, "You must have known the day you left Howard that you would be coming back." He said, "Because you're ready, you're prepared." And that was my dream, to go to Howard and teach. And so I was still kind of walking in his shadow, in his footsteps. And Howard had a rather large art department in those days. This is the 1960s. I came in 1962. So in 1963, when he decided to take a year's leave to go to Africa on a Ford Foundation grant, of all the people on the faculty, he chose me to be the acting chair in his absence. In those days, there was no such thing as a search committee. I mean, whoever was in charge designated. So Loïs Jones, James Wells, Lila Asher, all these people, I was the one that he literally handpicked to take his place. So I kind of imprinted myself at Howard, organizing exhibitions, bringing in visiting speakers. So I remained there for 4 years. I feel like I'm just a grain of sand on the beach. There are so many other important parts of it. But in certain ways, it is important that I be there, that I continue, as my mentor, James Porter, said, to paint. But he always felt that the two could go together. I could be an artist, but I could also be a scholar. I could be one who helped define things. And so that's been a part of the mission of what I felt that I could and should do.
In the winter of 1962, January, I came and entered Howard University as a freshman because I hadn't completed my a whole freshman year at the Rhode Island School of Design, and suddenly was totally involved in the poster making for the protests, because I'd been doing posters all through high school and various church and social groups that my mother belonged to. James Wells, as my printmaking teacher, probably had the most direct influence on my attitudes of being an artist and a printmaker, because we used to talk about that. You know, he allowed me to make my prints in the sign shop where I worked, and I would bring them in and he would critique them there. And I was as a teaching assistant. But at the same time, we would talk about what it's like to make prints for other people, because some of the students were always after me to, well, can you do this, you know, with my print? You did that with yours. Can you do that with mine? And so on. And he was my hero, because he understood about art and philosophy, and you know, and you know, the stories, and also the passion to make art. But intellectually, James Porter was my guy. David Driskell had a wonderful relationship and friendship with James Herring, and had brought several of the senior students to Herring, where they had a wonderful little exhibition there, which actually I was given the opportunity to curate that exhibition. I matted and framed and hung you know, and so on, because David was one of those people who said, well, you know, if you want to do this, you don't have to be a senior or, you know, or a junior. You know, I was a sophomore to do this. You know more about it than anyone else. You do it. You know, David Driskell was also the person when we were teaching. He was teaching a class in methods and materials. He says, well, Stovall, you seem to know much about, or maybe more about methods and materials as I do. Why don't you teach the class and I'll add to it? His spirit and his generosity was the same as that of Porter and of Wells. So that was the community around, you know, around Howard University and around Washington that was going on. So it was not only was it the physical nature of making paintings and making art and writing papers and all that, but there was this intellectual component going on that kind of fueled our imaginations. And so Porter just insisted that everyone be as intellectual as possible about everything, you know. You know, he would correct our English and insist that papers be written with proper grammar and that kind of thing. It was wonderful to receive that kind of education.